nearly 700 guns. Nearly 700 airsoft guns were submitted for the show through Facebook polls, Instagram messages, and through emails, and I have to pick 5 to star in this show. Nah, I'm gonna squeeze in as many as I can because I have over 20 amazing builds that need to be seen. I could actually put together a whole episode on just World War II and World War I builds, and you'll see why soon. It's been a while since I put together a serious episode for the Airsoft Top series, and this is a great way to return to it. This is the show where we gather hundreds of custom airsoft guns, have them ranked by a panel of judges, and show them off so the owners can get some of the respect that they deserve. This is where we marvel over some homemade builds, conversions, high-speed AEGs, heavy-hitting gas blowbacks, and so much more. This is the Airsoft Top series, and this is just 10 amazing custom airsoft guns, which is sponsored by G&G Armament. G&G has a lot of stuff dropping soon, from the 308 MBR SPRs, the Piranha pistol line, the PRK9, and so much more. So keep an eye on G&G, because you just might see something that you really like releasing very soon. Alright, so let's start with something that you don't see very often. You're actually going to see a lot of that kind of stuff in this episode. Robin is up first with this quick handmade flare pistol that fires from Tanaka or PPS 3-shot shells. This is just a little simple homebrewed build that I'm sure is a lot of fun to get close-up hits with. And just like that, we're moving into 9th spot. It's pretty safe to say that a lot of us love the GHK Groza, right? You know, the Bullpup AK. Well, they can be pretty expensive, even if you can find one for sale. Those things are legendary for being difficult to find. So, here's a couple CYMAs that Bryce converted into Grozas thanks to the power of the Polarstar F2 engine and an Inferno Gen 1. Stationed in El Paso, Texas, but originally from Oregon, Bryce used the CMO 35A, an AKS-74U, as his base gun, which would quickly be gutted to begin the conversion work. First, he modified the version 3 gearbox shell and front wired a micro switch trigger that was soldered to the HPA trigger board. Then he removed the trigger guard, slightly widened the hole in the original pistol grip to mount it with a bolt. Then he created his own stock, front receiver stock locking latch, gas block, and his own flash hider thanks to a 3D printer. And due to the low cost of the base rifle and to the in-house printing, Bryce can make either of these for less than $600, which is a pretty great deal for one of the rarest bullpups you can ever find in airsoft. I know it'll never match how cool the gas blowback rifle is, but it's still very cool to see both of these just sitting there. Bryce just really wanted his own Groza, and he knew other people really wanted one too. And he knew he could supply his own replacement parts with his own kits, along with shipping them worldwide as desired. And that's how you can make some really good money if you can keep up with demand. And I really hope that works out for Bryce, because this really looks good. But diving deeper into the ground up builds, I just have to show some love to this well-respected UK builder. Because this is probably the only Gepard 12.7mm that I think exists in Airsoft, thanks to Skunk Airsoft Works. So this isn't Skunk's first time ever being showcased in the Airsoft Top series, and it probably won't be the last. After all, when you can build something like this from scratch just so you can say that you can, then you probably have some skill. This is a pretty simple build though. The concept is an actual airsoft anti-material rifle that uses tag rounds. This build is all about elements and making you believe that you're firing a real rifle, from the sounds, the smell, and just by how it feels. Some people might really want a PTRS instead of this, not realizing how big that would be, so while you keep wishing to see an oversized SKS, Skunk Works will have this available for whenever you need to take down a technical with a little bit more style and a little bit more flair than an M203 can give you. Okay, so how about a Lewis gun? There's a reason why I used one in the thumbnail. See, I was trying to fish out this build by Derek of Central Scotland. And I really gotta thank my longtime coach, Scout the Doggy, for making me even aware of this gun with this old video. Where else would I find a freaking Lewis gun that was built from an M16? Derek, seen here, 3D printed some full-size plans for a Lewis gun, and he just went to work. The gun itself was modified using plasticard, polymer clay, and PVC guttering, and just out of personal preference, he went with the anti-aircraft magazine instead of the infantry pan that's more commonly seen. It took a few games to get the magazine to feed properly, but when it ran, it had an awesome low-pitched sound thanks to the barrel shroud, said Derek. The weak link, however, was the gearbox that ultimately grenaded itself, shearing off the whole front section of it. After that, Derek sadly scrapped this build, leaving us with one less Lewis gun in the airsoft world. Derek builds a lot though, so I'm sure he could build another one if he wanted to. He has his own Carl Gustav, he built a Maxim 1915E. Derek gets around, let's just say that. But there is another Lewis that I want to show off, and this one is coming from another legendary builder, this time in Hong Kong. This is the $2,560 Shogun's Custom Lewis Gun. First off, I love a lot of the work that comes from the Shogun's workshop, and I share a lot of it on the USAirsoft Instagram, and how could I not? Furthermore, how could someone not buy this immediately once it hit the show floor after it was built? Now sadly, there's not a whole lot of information I could get on this build due to a bit of a language barrier between us. But everything that you see here, from what I can gather, is made exactly like how it would be on the real Lewis gun, using a lot of real parts. And honestly, I'm not surprised, because, well, that's just how Shoguns does things. But if somehow you're still not impressed, then I still have two more World War II guns that I think will shut you up.
There we go.
From what I've seen, World War II buffs want either an FG42, a Garand, maybe an Arasaka. But what about the FG42? Did you forget about that? Hopefully you haven't. From Montreal, Canada, this is Steve's FG42, and it's beautiful. Everything that you see here was built by Steve, besides the Sten gearbox used inside, the hop-up, and of course, the standard inner barrel. The gearbox was first reshimmed before the new custom microswitch was added in by Chris from Tactic Airsoft in Montreal. On the outside, everything else was 3D printed in ABS and ASA. Even the stock and foregrip were printed before being hydro dipped to look like wood to complete this nearly $1,000 custom. And that's all that needs to be said to wrap up Steve's project, a project that took several years to develop, to plan, and to construct. Steve even made a whole Facebook page dedicated to the build process of this FG42, where you can read so much more on it. If you want to see how this gun started, how it started to take shape, or how we used M14 style magazines to feed this gun, then that's where you'll want to do it. I'm just happy to see an actual functioning Airsoft FG42. Now let's just get some real wood on it and then get these on the market. That would be nice. And while we're at it, can we just get an airsoft company to start developing another gas blowback M1 Garand? Here, I'll even let Robert show you how he did it himself with a WE Tech M14. Thankfully, he replaced the bolt and the trigger set with RE Tech steel parts and a Precision Falcon 6.03mm inner barrel that was cut down to 350mm. The hop-up is standard, but the top-down center hop-up adjuster is aftermarket. The Marussian 8mm Tinker wood body contains a shortened down RE Tech summer recoil spring and a shortened down spring housing. And Robert did chip away some of the wood on the Garand stock to fit the M14 internals better. Then to finish up this Garand, Robert cut down 4 standard M14 gas magazines and tapped them for HPA. Each magazine can hold 18 6mm BBs for now, but Robert has plans to replace them with larger internal magazines if possible. Long story short though, Robert just made a reliable gas blowback M1 from a rifle I wouldn't ever touch. The WE M14 is a cool rifle in theory, but shoddy when it comes to internal quality. You need to do a little bit of work to them if you want to keep them running, so this conversion is very much appreciated. But with this build squared away, that'll wrap up all the World War II builds for this show. I still have 2 more guns to run down, and both of them are masterpieces in their own category. We've seen what happens when a certain gun isn't in the airsoft world yet. Someone is bound to build one themselves. We've seen that with the FG42, the Grozas, the Lewis guns. Even Dave Taylor of Dave's Custom Airsoft Ltd is making his own HK23, and it's pretty damn stunning. So I better see some praises for Sam from Minnesota, because he's taking up the runner-up spot for this SKS. Yes, you're seeing that correctly. Here's that SKS that we've all been dreaming of. And this one began taking shape in January of 2017, and it's still ongoing. Due to a lot of the repurposed parts, however, the approximate cost of this build is around $415. For Sam, his fascination with the SKS began with video games. It just felt like it represents an interesting point in firearms history, so he started to look around for a suitable replica that sadly didn't exist and still doesn't. So Sam made his own, starting with a real stock. The receiver was first mocked up with some wood and then milled with aluminum, with the outer barrel being a repurposed M14 barrel. The rear sight block, gas tube, and stock clamps had to be then 3D printed, and the top of the cover was also 3D printed before it was replaced with one made from steel. Powering the SKS, a Mancraft PDIK manual HPA engine can be found inside, which feeds from an M4 style hop-up that accepts AK magazines, of course. All of this completes one of the best looking airsoft guns that I've ever seen, and finally gives us the SKS so many of us have wanted. It's a real shame that we don't have a good SKS for airsoft yet, but I guess this is one good thing that we got out of it. Sam's SKS. It was pretty hard to dwindle this countdown to 10 builds after getting 700 of them submitted. I still wish we had time to talk about this Bren, or some of the sci-fi builds that got submitted. I mean, just look at this DH-17 blaster from Tyler. I guess I'll just have to make another episode as soon as possible, because those guys need to be seen. But let me just bring in the showstopper. Now when I say this, I absolutely mean it. This is my pick for the most beautiful airsoft gun that I have ever seen. This instantly shot up to the top spot once it was submitted, and I'm so happy to introduce you to probably the only airsoft Gatling gun that exists. Where do I even begin with this build? I mean, what do I say? Owned by Martin from the West Midlands, but built by Lee Killoran, this multi-barreled, one-of-a-kind classic piece is shockingly built off a Tokamori M14 that was stripped of all external furniture. The new Gatling gun skin has a gear setup that links to a crank handle to a lever that actually pulls the trigger, which can be set up to either 3 or 6 shots per rotation of the crank. The crank mechanism actually uses 3D printed parts and belts to make a large gear rotate the barrels. However, the gun actually shoots through the center spindle, sadly. Surprisingly, even with the massive size and obvious craftsmanship that went into this build, Martin paid less than he would on a classic Army microgun. This is a sub $700 build. But is that really right, or am I missing something here? Hearing that makes me really consider looking into getting one of these built for my collection as a main centerpiece. That will make anyone yell this out like Cole did of another serious airsoft podcast. Holy f***, is that a f***ing Gatling gun? The original idea to fire through the center of the barrel assembly was admittingly Martin's. He realized that it would be extremely difficult to get the gun to fire through the rotating barrels, so he ditched the idea early on. But after that, Lee and his father came up with the gear mechanism, and the rest is history. The whole thing, of course, weighs a ton. One person can pick it up though, but only to carry it. The support bracket has a set of bearings that sits on the tripod to enable it to be transversed easily, but don't expect to move this anywhere quickly. This is a real set piece, something you build games around, even more than you would with the standard M134 minigun. I can't believe I had to say standard minigun. It's a true piece of art that almost anyone would want to fire. Even just cranking the handle to see the barrels move would put a smile on my face, and since this whole gun can be considered an AEG, there's no need for a tank, a regulator, or a hose. Just plug it in and go. Well, as much as you can go with a Civil War era tripod mounted rotary gun will allow you to do. Lee Killoran and his father get my respect for this build. They built the best looking and most impressive custom airsoft gun that I have ever seen. And that's why it's taking the top spot for this countdown. Okay, just one more build, just because it was the very first submission that was made, and because it's from my home state. One thing that I've always hoped that these countdowns would do is inspire people to keep building, to keep using their imaginations, and to give people no reason to give up on being original. Because if David can make this from a clear PVC pipe, some bare bones 3D printing, and a Polarstar fusion engine, then you really have no right to complain about not being able to go airsoft. Of course, it's very lightweight, because it's a freaking pipe with a magwell and a trigger assembly after all, and I'm sure anyone that gets hit by this close up and sees David just run by with this thing in his hands immediately questions what the hell that thing was. And for making this, I would just like to say, thank you, David. Thank you for being you. And like that, we've gone over 10 amazing custom airsoft guns from all around the world. And that's just another episode of the Airsoft Top Series finished. This is my longest running series, and the series that I have the most fun with. I get to show off a lot of stuff that hasn't been exposed yet to anyone else, and I hope you enjoyed seeing some of that stuff here today. I don't know if we'll ever be able to top some of the builds that you saw here, but if you'd like to see more, then please subscribe now to help USAirsoft break 200,000 subscribers. Or show your love for these builds with a like on this video and a comment on your favorite gun that I showcased today. I'd also like to thank all the Facebook groups that hosted polls like the UK Airsoft Community, the Airsoft Heretics group, the Polar Star Owners group, and the Airsoft Teching Q&A group, and G&G Armament for sponsoring this episode. I wouldn't have been able to even make this show without any of them. But until that next video drops from the city of San Antonio, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I will be sure to see you all next time.